What's up everyone, welcome to today's video, welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So we're taking a detour from Gotham Knights. You guys know once in a while, probably every so many weeks, I would engage in some of the conversations surrounding gaming. And I think this one is actually bearing on my mind more than any other news out there, including God of War, because we all know God of War is going to do what it does. It's going to be fine. It's the continuation of the game that we played in 2018. So what you're expecting is that quality or slightly better, if anything, because the game kind of started its development probably maybe when the first one was about to ship or after the first one already shipped. Today's discussion, nonetheless, is surrounding Sony and their attitude towards Microsoft wanting to get Call of Duty in an exclusive setting. Now, this is very telling of what kind of a company Sony is. Now, I don't feel any remorse nor support for any of these big corporations, honestly. They're going to corporation, if you get what I mean. Corporation is going to corporation or whatever it is. But it's interesting to see that Sony does not want to receive the full force of exclusivity competition while being a company that is extra exclusive with their own video games. I know someone is probably going to say something, but you have to be objective about this. There is no doubt that this crying that Sony is doing, and I put that in quotes, regarding the possibility of Call of Duty being available only on the PlayStation for maybe a maximum of 3 years, this is what the reports are saying anyways, is just unfounded. That's just the truth. Now, let's go ahead and look at a little bit of evidence, because I know this is probably going to be something that, you really kind of have to back up in a sense, and we're going to talk about it. So what's going on here? Sony has been acquiring a bunch of studios. So has Microsoft. They've both been doing this. They're playing pretty much very similar game. Now, in this generation, nonetheless, Microsoft took a detour, a different approach that had the long game written all over it. Game Pass, not only Game Pass, but for Xbox and PC. Sony, on the other hand, just kind of got into this game by trying to bring their exclusives to console, but it's not necessarily a thing where they're bringing these day one exclusives. And so they're already behind by nature of their own business ideology and business practice. So there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just what they've chosen to go with. Now, in this entire vein, Sony was able to acquire some really solid studios and put out some really solid games. Studios like Sucker Punch was acquired by Sony. Another studio that was acquired by Sony in all of this is Insomniac, the creators of Sunset Overdrive. Imagine that. They made a game for Microsoft. Microsoft did not necessarily seem interested in keeping them as a studio. Maybe it just was the thing that didn't work out, if you get what I mean. And Sony seemed to have a better, more appealing proposition, and so they went with them. Also, Microsoft made the very big error to not collaborate with Marvel games, and this was actually a big deal at that time. And so Sony got the cake, won, did a lot of exclusives, sold a bunch of consoles, and really did deliver a lot to gamers. So this was the expected practice that Sony put into play in a sense. Now, both studios had been doing that, but in terms of bigger IPs, Sony seemed a lot more committed to actually making this a thing with their consoles. Microsoft lost this battle on that short term, and I'm not gonna say on the short term because there were so many exclusives. You had the Uncharted series, The Last of Us. You're probably gonna be getting Wolverine and Spider-Man 2 that are gonna be PlayStation exclusives. I think they're gonna come to PC, no doubt. And so Microsoft decided that they were going to take their own strategy to be a more affordable platform or more accessible platform in terms of the cost, analyses to gamers. Now, putting this all into perspective, you will see, though, that Microsoft is providing way more value for their gamers than Sony actually is. Now, Sony seeing this acquisition, timeline with Microsoft, using a bunch of their dollars that they had sitting in overseas funds to go after big developers like Activision and ZeniMax. It seemed like that has rattled Sony. Now, Sony acquired Bungie, but it's not enough. Bungie already has made Activision a much more valuable company in a sense, even though Activision already had a whole bunch of stuff going on with them. But with Bungie actually getting in, with Sony, it didn't necessarily seem like the timing was right. I think immediately they left Activision would have probably been the best time, but Microsoft kind of kept a lot of their, strategy close to their sleeves. And then in 2017, I think this is where we got this from. In 2017, there was a huge transformation with the tax bills in terms of Congress and all of the above. And one of the companies that brought in a bunch of money was Microsoft. So Microsoft has been sitting on a bunch of cash, and even big companies like I think at that time Apple did not bring in any money from offshore accounts because there was a tax break, but they refused to. Now there's news and there are rumors that they are trying to acquire EA, or Amazon is trying to acquire EA. It's like everybody was waiting, but Microsoft is already on the forefront. They've committed so much to this Xbox thing that they really do want to win. There's no doubt about that. And seeing all that in place, it's interesting to Sony, that it's interesting to me anyways, that Sony is trying to deflect this as a moral conundrum rather than actually admitting that this is actually a chess move. The chess move being Microsoft would want a lot of concession from a lot of these Sony exclusives. And that's very obvious here. They've acquired ZeniMax, and so you already have the potential of Starfield. You already have the potential of the Elder Scrolls games. You already have the potential of all of these Bethesda franchises like Fallout being exclusive to the Xbox console. Now, seeing that you also have, the potential of Call of Duty, Sony needs to understand that what Microsoft is probably going to be asking for is for these exclusives to come to the Xbox. Now, some people are committed console fans in a weird sense, and I'm like, why would you put your loyalties to all these companies that most likely don't even care about who you are? You're a number and a cash, asset to them in a sense, or a cash producing asset. Even though they have to work hard to get your money, it still doesn't necessarily grant them the, it doesn't grant them any kind of, right to your funds or to your loyalty or whatever it is. So when you take a neutral approach to this, you're going to see that this is exactly what's playing out. And if these games are able to start making their way to more consoles, it will provide a very huge, interesting market force in a sense that I think many gamers would like to see. And right now, what's going on in the gaming world needs to be understood as Microsoft is playing this hard ball that Sony has played for such a long time. I mean, do you want to tell me that there are no instances when Sony has actually or Microsoft has said, hey man, it'd be nice to have this game on our console, but Sony said, nah, we're going to keep it exclusive. I mean, think about it. So I think it's high time that Sony starts to actually maybe go ahead and keep their exclusives and stand by it, rather than have to sit there and whine about, oh, this is not fair, blah, 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 blah. That's not going to really convince anyone. Play the game how you want, Sony, and just take this L if that's what it's going to be, or at least respond with your own shooter that's going to allow for people to have some respect for you in that sense. And if you cannot respond with your own shooter, go buy one. Peace out.